Hello and welcome to another episode of the World Class Real Estate Podcast. My name is Worrall. I'm joined today by Ian MacBeth. Ian, we are into September. You're back after having the whole of August off. How are you, my man?
Yeah, I'm recharged and feeling good. Looking forward to September. To be fair, I've actually had a really nice summer. It's been a couple of different trips. I just come back from Chamonix watching the World Cup finals, if you like, of ultra running. Watching the elites over the mountains of Mont Blanc, which was very inspirational, aspirational, and just a great trip, actually, just being there and managed to do a bit of hiking and get up and down some of the big mountains and stuff like that. So I feel really good, actually, and I'm looking forward to September, the last third of the year. I enjoy this part of the year. I love September. I love October as months for a estate agency. It's just, kids go back to school for me tomorrow. So, or the day of recording tomorrow. So today, if you're listening on the Wednesday, the kids have gone back to school. And that's just sees a boom for me normally is what we find in valuations and listings. And mortgage rates are moving in the right direction. And overall, I'm feeling really confident about the back end of this year, to be fair. What about you?
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. We talked about it last week about September and October, the importance of them. And I've kind of approached, similarly to you, have had a lot of time off in August. But then with kids, you want to spend the time with them. So, and it's the time where we're not traditionally very busy. And I think we're in a much more traditional estate agency market this year than we have been for quite some time. But I feel really refreshed and really ready to go. And I'm actually kind of targeting September almost like a January with health, diet, fitness, and business as well. That I've got to hit the ground running because I've been injured, so I've not been in the gym, I've not been eating as healthy, so that has a bit of a knock-on effect. But I've sort of approached today up early to do the podcast. I've got a hospital appointment in a couple of hours, so hopefully they can start training again. And I feel really good, really positive, and really full of energy. So bring it on, I say.
Yeah, hopefully the industry is the same. I think that's what I'm seeing when I'm listening and talking to buyers and sellers is people are feeling full of energy. I think it's a good word, actually, full of energy. I think, summer holidays out the way always has an impact. We'll see what the second week of September does to everyone's diaries. But I've actually found it quite busy for valuations over the summer holidays. I think the first 2 weeks, everyone just disappeared, then came back and then kind of sort of cracked on a little bit. So we found sort of end of July, probably second week of August, up to the second week of August was quite quiet where solicitors just disappeared, everyone went. But in the second half of August, it was really busy for valuations and for listings and stuff. So I'm hoping everyone is geared up ready. And I think the industry is, and I think the mortgage advisors are, and it seems like the banks are, and it seems like confidence is there. I saw the statistics for August, I think, from Rightmove that said buyer activity is 16% up, sales activity is like 12% up, and listing activity is 5% up. So all the metrics were up in whichever roundabout way that landed. So, I think everyone should be geared up and ready for a good September and a good October for the market, really.
Yeah, they're all positive numbers coming out from that, which is really encouraging. Today, we're going to talk about recruitment. We've not talked about it for a little while. We've talked about it in the past, but not for a little while. It's an area where agents often struggle, I think. You've obviously got quite a lot of experience, not just with Avocado, but previously as well about recruitment. So what are you most looking forward to about today's show?
Yeah, I mean, Myles is a great guy. He's an expert. He's been doing it for many, many years now, and he's linked to a lot of, good businesses. And his dad's a seasoned estate agent as well, with a good reputation. So it's in the blood. His brother's an estate agent himself, a good standard at a good company. So, they understand the industry, but he understands as a specific recruitment. And I think this is a huge topic, and it's a huge part of getting the industry to the level that everyone wants it to move to is the starting place, which is your people, and how you get your people into the business and what you do with them after. So this is the foundation of that, really. So yeah, should we get Myles on?
Let's do it.
So we're now joined by Myles White from Crux, and I've known Myles for quite some years actually. We used to work together back in my employment days with candidates and trying to get me some staff when I needed them. Myles is super passionate about recruitment, loves talking agency as well. So welcome to the show, Myles, and thanks for joining us on this topic of recruitment, training, and sometimes exit as well, as I'm sure
Yeah.
we'll cover. But how are you,
Cheers for
buddy?
having me. Yeah, all good. Yeah, no, cheers for having me. Yeah, really good. Thriving away.
Fabulous.
Good stuff.
Thanks very much for joining us, Myles. We'll start as we start every podcast here and ask you, what does world-class real estate look like to you?
World-class real estate. I think the number one word I'd use is probably culture. I think when it comes to my recruitment space, it's a lot easier to recruit in someone that's got a good culture and has a good reputation, or is at least trying to show that on interviews that they're building a good business and a long-term project.
We've
And
mentioned
what does,
culture a few times, haven't we, Mark? Actually, it's something that is probably a buzzword now that people are thinking about talking about, but they probably weren't when we started agency as such.
yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We talk about it a lot, but I'd be really interested to hear it from your point of view, Myles, when you're looking at candidates and what have you. What does a good culture and a good reputation look like externally to people who are looking at businesses with a view of going to work there?
I don't think there's one set picture around what is the perfect culture because every single individual candidate's their own person. So, everyone's got their own identity, everyone's got their own idea of what is the perfect culture, is the perfect business. I think if we go back 20, 30, 40 years ago when it was a real sales environment, I suppose main narrative is a sales business that you can earn the world in, with an amazing commission structure, and you're hitting the phone, or not even hitting the phones, hitting your write-off sheets. Whereas now I think it's more orientated around a business being able to fit around that individual because we are so, we all have our individual perspectives on life. And I think a big factor around recruitment is a business owner being able to understand that and reading to someone on an interview. I see way too much these days in terms of the interview process being all about, is the candidate right for the job, and not, is the business right for the candidate? And I think good business owners, or world-class real estate, as we're calling it, is someone who can sell their dream to the candidate.
Got to have a future outlook then. So do you think that's important for people that want to get into agency, people that are in agency, that have been in a couple of years now? Do you think that's something that they're really actively thinking about themselves, or do you just think that's something that in the interview they really buy into, which is, where is this business going over the next 5-10 years?
I think your elite candidates, the candidates we call A grade, do think about that kind of stuff. I think the quality of candidate in the estate agency world at the moment, unfortunately, isn't great. But that's where, as a business owner, you need to recognise, right, am I speaking to an A grade candidate, or just a candidate here that still might be good in their own way, but being able to recognise what that candidate wants in order to sell the dream of working for your business.
And how are you recognising, you say those A grade candidates are perhaps a little bit few and far between. Other than the obvious, how are you recognising those and placing them into businesses where they fit? I'd be really interested to know what the signs are that we've got a really good candidate here, or potentially a really good candidate if maybe they're not A grade yet.
It's difficult because I don't want to big myself up too much, but I can typically tell within 30 seconds of just speaking to them whether someone's made of the right stuff or not. And I think first, to give a summary, and I think it comes down to just their pitch, their tone of voice, their excitement when it comes to speaking to you as a recruiter. Are they interested? Are they genuinely wanting to build a career for themselves? Or are they just someone who's looking for a job? Which is fine, by the way. There's no problem with people just looking for a job. I think it's that just that enthusiasm they have, because it's so hard to come by at the moment in the property world. Because like I say, I think the biggest issues with our industry right now is it's long hours. It's includes a lot of weekends. It's typically low salaries and all about commission, and people just want the opposite at the moment. So the people who are genuinely keen on working in the property industry are, one, hard to come by, unfortunately. And secondly, if they do have that enthusiasm and passion for property, I think that's where you can recognise, right, we've got a winner here, because they're not just seeing themselves doing this for a paycheck over the next 2-3 years and jumping on someone else. This is someone who sees themselves doing this for the next foreseeable.
How do we get more people that want to work in the property industry? I know it's the big golden question, but what do you think needs to change to start attracting A-grade people that are not looking at agency as an option for them at the moment? You know, how do we get those really good 22, 23-year-olds that are like, now they're maybe out of uni, college, or they've done a bit of moving about and now they're ready to kind of focus on a career? How do we get those good people that into our industry?
I think it's about trying to be as dynamic as you possibly can. So especially the corporates just simply can't do it. And I understand why, and I don't have the solution. I wish I did. But especially the corporates, they're very much right. Everyone works to the same package. Everyone works to the same hours. Everyone does this. Everyone does that. If you're a negotiator in the best branch, or if you're a negotiator in the worst branch, you're on the same salaries and the same packages, working the same hours. I think if someone comes to you that's needs a little bit of flexibility, or they've got to pick up their child from school at certain hours, or they need to, you know, that they've got a passion for football like myself. I mean, that's the reason I got out of the property industry, is because I play football on Saturdays and I didn't want to work Saturdays. So, you know, just having that little bit of flexibility around people's lifestyles and their personal needs, rather than just sitting down, here's your contract and work to these hours and this salary and this pay package. And I'm seeing some businesses do that at the moment, and they're thriving for it.
Do you think kids is a big milestone? I mean, that's my belief, that agency when you have children is a really difficult industry to be in.
Yeah, 100%. Another thing I'm seeing a lot on LinkedIn at the moment is people who I've reached out to, say, you know, 6 months to a year and a half ago, up to sort of 2 years, people who have gone on to maternity, paternity leave. You know, their response to me is, right, yeah, let's catch up. You know, you've caught me at the wrong time. I'm actually going on maternity, paternity leave. I'll catch up when I'm on my return, because I'm not sure whether I'll be staying or leaving. And literally nine out of 10 of them are all out of the industry.
Straight out the industry. So not even looking for that more flexible option within the industry. Is that because they don't think it exists?
It's certainly not within the industry as a estate agency or real estate, so to say. I mean, we're fortunate enough to be part of the ICG, who are the PropTech sort of space spanner group. So that's a sort of industry that's doing quite well at the moment, because it's better salaries. It's 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. So we are seeing a lot of estate agents jumping from estate agency into the PropTech world. It's just very hard for that level of sort of 6 months negotiator up to maybe 5 to 10 years of experience, where they're probably a little bit under par to jumping into the PropTech space.
I want to go back.
Sorry, Mark, you go.
I want to go back to something that you mentioned before about, when we talk about world-class real estate and culture, because I think it's really interesting if we can give some value to our listeners around how they can give over to candidates that their business is the right fit. I think that was a great point that you made before about, is the business right for the candidate? Because ultimately, as a business, we don't want candidates who are right. The cost of training and developing these people for them then to leave will, you know, prove massive problems. So how do we get over that our business is right for that candidate? Is that about having something really set, that this is how you work, that this is how much flexibility there is, and let people choose within that? And have you got an example of where you've tried to place someone in a business and the culture has come across really well, and when you've tried to place someone and the culture has come across really badly? Can you talk about maybe some of the things that happened in those interviews without obviously giving too much away?
Yeah, sure. I think just to overall answer that point, um, you've it's like a valuation. If you've got a valuation where a vendor's only wanting to take 1% fee, and I think you've got to have your boundaries. You've got to have your limitations around who you are as a business. This is our identity. We all know avocado as a business, or I certainly do, given I'm in the area, and I can tell what's right for them just by looking at them from an outsider's point of view.
Yeah.
Ian's definitely got a set of standards that, right, you must tick these boxes before you join me. I think absolutely have your standards, have your ethics. Understand who you are as a culture and what you're doing that's right. It's the flexibility piece that's also quite essential to be more dynamic on. So it's like a valuation. If someone only wants to sell the house for 1%, just walk away from it. It's sometimes these things just don't work for us. I think going into interviews would be a little bit hard because I have so many. It's hard to try and recall every single one, I'm afraid. So I'd probably struggle to answer that one.
Is there any examples you can think about talking about interviews where you think you've placed someone and they've come off and they've said it went really badly because they said or did this, and that doesn't fit with what they're thinking? Things that maybe businesses can avoid doing to mess up interviews, because it's not just an interview one way, is always my belief. You mentioned it before, you've got to sell the business to the candidate. So where do businesses go wrong in that?
There's so many examples, changing the spec last minute, promising one thing to us as a recruiter. It's a really frustrating one where we get told X and then on an offer, or back end of the stage, or even on the interview before we get to offer stage, it turns out being something completely different.
Yeah.
Just full transparency. I think offering full transparency in terms of this is what we should offer, this is what you're expected to get, this is what you're expected to earn. If you put in X, Y, Z targets, us as a recruiter being able to speak about those things prior to interview, it's like, wow, as a candidate, the amount of preparation it sort of feels like someone's gone into is immense. Whereas typically the sort of information we get is salary, do they work weekends? If so, how many? And what hours is it Monday to Friday? It's very, very basic details. I think the biggest mistake is just not being transparent about your business, your long-term project, your long-term goal. I had one instance where a candidate was earning X amount of a percentage of team commission, so a percentage of what the office was doing. And interviews went well. Everything went great. Got to offer. Got a call from the business owner who said, "Right, Myles, here's the offer. Here's the package." And I said, "Okay, great. It's obviously an office commission. What did your business turn over last year?" And they didn't want to tell me. Oh, sorry. What did your office turn over last year? And they didn't want to tell me. It's like, right, okay. So how am I meant to tell this candidate what they're expected to earn? I was in absolute no man's land. So I had a bit of a bum fight with them, and eventually I had a gun to my head. They just wouldn't give me the answer.
It's strange that, like, we've spoke about the biggest complaint with clients is communication, but I haven't really thought about it on this side of things, that transparency with the candidate is also the biggest frustration that you kind of got here. Do you think it's that a lot of, because my knowledge of agency is no one talks about salary, no one's allowed to talk about salary, everyone's on different numbers, and that makes it quite an awkward sort of environment. Money is like just, money and wages is just not discussed.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is the case, but I guess it's because maybe the owners are sort of, I don't know, trying to get away with different people on different numbers, and they don't want to have someone knocking on their door saying, well, Bob's on X and I'm on Y. But if that was a bit more open or a bit more leveled, it might make things a little bit easier, I guess, as well. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say so. Look, once again, I don't have the solution around how you actually hold people knowing what people are earning. I think from a commission perspective, it's a lot easier. Knowing what people are earning through their OTEs, through the targets that are set, I think easy to work around. You know, if you sell these amount of houses, if you rent this amount of houses, this is a commission structure. Um, People should know what amongst your colleagues who's earning what through commission. I think from a salary perspective, it's a little bit niche and harder to work around. But I think it's just about, I think maybe from an introduction perspective, if you've got someone new joining the business that's from a different background, that's maybe a mum that needs more flexible hours, or, um, upon them joining, you have a team meeting before they actually join the branch and join the office. You sit down and say, look, this is who they are. This is their background. And having those types of conversation. And if it comes down the line and they come to you and complain because they're earning a similar salary to you on more flexible hours, I think you just, once again, transparency. Just have an honest chat. This is who they are. This is what they're about. This is, I think that's probably the best approach, but I don't have that solution. But I think transparency is key.
I would say most estate agency websites are either quite vanilla, they kind of got quite similar stuff, or they're not the sort of truth, if that makes sense. They're like overselling something that they're not really doing, and that for clients can be quite frustrating. Is that the same with like the recruiting page, would you say, or do people normally get the recruiting part of it and who we are, the about us? Does that part of it normally mirror up with the business, or are they quite far away from the reality as well?
In terms of the actual package that they're offering, or
more just if the candidate is doing a little bit of surfing on the website, just trying to get to know the business as a brand, because that's their shop window for someone to look at. Do you find they marry up, or again, is the cultural fit a little bit different to the website, or is it not important?
No, I think it's definitely important. I think it's a handful of very successful businesses that actually marry up to it. I think there's a certain corporate, you'll probably know who I'm talking about, where I see promotions all the time on LinkedIn, but me and you both know that that's just a marketing thing. From the outsider's perspective, it's a business that's always internally promoting, always bringing on new people, constantly growing such and such. Whereas I know deep down that they're returning like a revolving door, and they're putting negotiators into branch managers' seats that have only been doing it for 2 years.
Yeah.
So if you can get it right, if you can get your brand and image to actually match up who you are as a business and culture and reflect down on an interview, that's where you'll do well on interviews. And I don't think a lot of people do that very well.
Yeah, I think it's hard for people to achieve. You just mentioned there about a revolving door. We'll talk about exit in a few minutes. But before we go to that, you mentioned about transparency, some of the mistakes that agents make that you've seen about changing job spec, changing offers and what have you. Do you think in our industry we go into recruitment underprepared? Because I'm getting the sense from some of the answers that you've given today that actually the preparation into it and maybe taking your time rather than rushing is perhaps one of the most important things that you could do if you want to try and recruit a successful team.
Sorry, you're saying taking your time is the right thing to do?
Yeah. Do you see most agents being underprepared for recruitment because they just rush into it and they want to fill a hole?
Yeah, I think there's a fine balance between the two, because if you take too long, a good candidate's in and off the books within, a matter of moments. So you can't dilly-dally about for the right person. I think it's about sitting down, refining your interview process, being able to explain who you are as a business, why you're good, why you should join us. This is where you're going to be in long-term, X amount of years. This is what we can offer you. And then obviously getting to know the candidate, making sure they're going to be right for your business. They tick the boxes that suits your culture, your ethics. They can do the kind of numbers that we want to be referring to. I think just sit down and actually think about the process, guys. It's like, it's not that hard. It's an interview at the end of the day. You're just sitting down and having a conversation with someone. I suppose when it comes to me checking out candidates, I'm jumping on a somewhere between a 5 to 25 minute phone call with them and sounding them out and making sure they're actual decent people. And I think that's the biggest part is, are you just a decent person?
Mm.
I think the world of standards has changed as well. I've been in it for 21 years, and I just think over that period of time, the way that an estate agency director or manager or owner interviews has to be different now. It's kind of, I used to know someone that was strategically late for an interview. They were like 15, 20 minutes late for an interview because they wanted to see what the person would do while they were kind of being left there effectively to not make them feel awkward. Like the old school kind of
candidate
style.
or client?
So, say again?
The candidate or client did that, sorry. A client.
The client, yeah, the director interviewing the person, like that was their thing. That's how they would do interviews, is they would leave them hanging there for a little bit longer. Whereas now, I feel if you did that, people have a certain standard and care about their time. They would just walk out. If that happened, if my daughter was 17 going for an interview and that happened, I'd tell her to just walk out. It's not acceptable. But I think people misunderstand sometimes, what the purpose of the interview is as well a little bit. It's not to try and catch someone out. It's not to fine comb their CV and see if they've, put some dates slightly different. It's to try and work out if their personality is a fit for your business and your role. Do they have the skills that you need for the role? If they're going into a senior negotiator role and they've been a negotiator for 2.5 years elsewhere, then what do you need in that senior negotiator role? Because are they the senior negotiator that has to be the star commission earner, or are they meant to be training 2 other junior members of staff, and how to do agency? It's 2 different skills for that role. It's not the same role. So you kind of have to, for me, in an interview, really have to know what it is you want, and then you sit down and you just get to know someone. You try and really have an interview where you really get an insight into what makes them tick and what's going to motivate them, and how, if they're driven at 8 out of 10 on a daily basis, they're going to be an A grade candidate for you, even if that might mean they weren't for someone down the road. So that is the way I always like to look at things, is, are they going to fit this role? And knowing your role is the most important part of that, or otherwise you can't really ask the key questions, I would say. I think that's where a lot of people get interviewing wrong. It's not interviewing, it's getting to know someone that might fit that hole, as you said off camera, that you do want. That's my view on it. And I think it's changed massively over the last, well, definitely since lockdown anyway. That's is that something that you've seen different for what people are looking for since lockdown?
Yeah, for sure.
Has that had an impact?
Yeah, lockdowns affected us massively. People got comfortable at home. People got comfortable with the flexibility. Don't get me wrong, there are some agents that like being in the office and like being around people. But I would say on the slightly majority side, people enjoyed that freedom, I suppose. They felt like they could do their job role from home. Estate agents aren't offering that anymore. And that's a factor that, is getting people to change industry.
Do you see any agents offering any sort of flexible working?
Yeah. One very local to us. They have valuers working from home on an employed basis. But we're talking a minority, not a lot of people, not a lot of agents. But it is the ones that are doing it that are reaping the rewards for it in terms of the talent that's coming through.
Yeah.
It's hard. Depends on the role a little bit, I guess. If you've got property managers, you can have them working at home. If you've got after sales, you can have them working at home, hybrid or whatever you want to do. Negotiators, I guess you could if they're a certain type of person, but then, valuers is an interesting one, because you would always think, well, it's location based. They need to go to the property. So, but then at the same time, for me, thinking back to some of the best valuers that I worked with when I was a director, have him at the morning meeting, and then, to be honest, I didn't really want to see him again for the rest of the day because it just made the office look lazy.
You shouldn't be in the office.
Yeah, just get out and let the negotiators do the work ethic here, because you're slowing everyone down.
Yeah.
So I guess it's a fair point. That's something that could be rewritten for sure. I think, and I think we would lose a lot less really good people. That's my big thing for why I've done what I've done, is I've seen so many talented people spend 10 years in the industry, build a really good career, be a really, really talented estate agent, and then leave for cybersecurity sales or go into IT recruitment or whatever it may be, just because it doesn't appeal to them in their 30s, in their mid 30s and into their 40s. And that's the thing that I would love to see the industry fix, because that's the big concern for me. I think minimum wage has had an impact on, it must have an impact on the quality of people that are coming through that are not estate agents, because you can't have that 12 grand member of staff doing 300 hours a week now. It's not possible.
You'll be surprised. I do have, I think the lowest salary I offered probably 14 recently.
Yeah. I just don't know whether that's legal anymore.
Well, it isn't.
To be honest,
it isn't. But the way they get around it is just a ridiculously good commission structure. But it comes back to a point you mentioned earlier, actually, around the person who turns up 50 minutes late to an interview. Because as soon as you said that, I was just thinking, right, he's very old school, or she. They're very old school, and they are all of that. Have you seen White Gold, the TV series?
no.
Is that the window salesman one?
Yeah, it's that's the type of environment I picture when someone says something like that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So it's similar to this client we work with, that we are having conversations with, by the way, around the salaries and packages they offer. You know, we don't just sit here and work on these things for the sake of it. But yeah, it reminds you of a business like that. You know, when you're saying someone turns up 50 minutes late to an interview, or they're offering a 14 grand salary, but they can earn 30 grand as a trainee. And by the way, that is true. I've seen people in their first years working there earn 30 grand as a trainee. But it's that very much salesy, 80s estate agent type environment that I've got in my head as a picture.
Yeah. Well, it is. That's where it will come from. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You could exchange window salesman for estate agency in the 80s, I reckon. And do you think there's a perception of our industry that it's still like that, which might be one of the reasons that we struggle to attract talented individuals?
Not as much as I would say it was. It certainly used to be that, for sure, but I think that's slowly dying out because estate agents are slowly changing.
Yeah.
To be more dynamic and flexible in their approach and showing their culture. And, Ian's doing a great job with his business in terms of showing personalities, because people are buying from Avocado or selling through Avocado because of their personalities, not because they're the White Gold sales chap that can talk the shoes off a donkey, Yeah.
It's probably a different combo, which we don't need to have today. But that's the self-employed versus employed world, isn't it? It's much easier for me to get personality out into the world, and it's much easier for the agents to do it when it's their company, it's them. That's probably a different convo. I think today's about trying to give as much value as we can to the industry, and I think the hours is a key thing. I remember when I really pushed for the 7 o'clock to 6:30, half an hour.
Yeah.
Big pitch PowerPoint went on, really trying to get that confirmed, and less weekends and closed over Christmas and, these sort of things. It's not easy to get that into a generation above me of estate agency owners, that started 10, 15 years before I did, and I've been doing it 20. That's hard, but it is getting there. I am seeing agents close earlier. I am seeing people try and make an effort on weekend rotas, and even closing on bank holidays, now as well. Seeing that Sundays, people not often open on a Sunday as an estate agent anymore. One thing that lockdown has done for our industry is it's made it easier to do appointments in working hours for clients, because more clients are also working from home and available at 2:30 on a Tuesday rather than having to do it at 10:30 on a Saturday. So I hope that helps. Have you seen office hours decrease and working hours decrease and weekend rotas improve as well across the board, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's, as I say, it's a slowly changing environment, but it is getting there. People are catching up. People are, it's like if I've had a vacancy open, same for yourself having a property on the market, for say too long than it should be, 2 months, 3 months, it's had no interest, no viewings whatsoever. You'd be talking about trying to reduce the house price. If I've got a vacancy that's been going for a month or two now, I'd be saying, right, something ain't right here. We need to sort it. And sometimes it's just about beating that door down a couple of times before the message gets through. But yeah, it is slowly changing for sure. I started working with an estate agent up north actually. I was taking down the job spec 2 weeks ago. Said, so what's your weekend rota? Oh, we don't work weekends. Oh, that's great to hear. And this was for a negotiator role.
Yeah.
So they obviously do some outsourced viewing stuff on the weekends and whatnot. But
that's nice.
Yeah, that's what we do. We shut our Saturdays in lockdown and never reopened. And we'll do viewings and we'll return calls, but the office is never open because it used to irritate me, to be perfectly honest. Sat here on a Saturday and the phone doesn't ring and no one comes in. So we don't open on a Saturday, and that you can see people when we've interviewed people for negotiator roles, and you say that, and there's a genuine surprise in the face. It's like, don't know. That's a massive thing. I wouldn't want to work weekends now. Well, not ever, to be perfectly honest. And it always makes me laugh when you said to Ian before, appointments within working hours are miles easier now. We get some clients say, "Well, I'm working Monday to Friday." I'm like, "Well, why should I work more than that or more hours than that?"
Yeah.
So that's my opinion on it. If the client's right for you, then they'll find time to fit you in. I want to talk a little bit about exit, Myles, and some of the common mistakes that you see agents make that leave that lead to good candidates leaving the business. What are the sort of most common mistakes that you see business owners make so that they lose good people that they don't want to lose? And is there a point of no return? So someone hands the notice in, you then try and right the wrongs that you've done, but the team member's mind has already been made up.
Yeah. Obviously, I hear this all through candidates, not through direct employers, because that would hurt egos. I think that the main one is just feeling undervalued, underappreciated. I always say if it gets to the point a candidate has to leave a job because they feel undervalued, they feel underpaid, they feel they're working too long, whatever the reason might be. And if it takes for that moment for an employer to counter offer you and try and keep you on board, that should be too late, in my opinion. That should be a point of no return. I think there's very marginal, a small percentage of cases where there is potentially it's savable, whether that someone's been there for 10, 15 years and not a year or two. I think it's a bit easier to try and counter offer and have that conversation where you can try and keep them. But I would say if they've only been there a handful of years, it's probably not worth the point in trying to keep them. Because the same issues just will reoccur in 6 months' time or a year's time, from the candidate's perspective and the employer's perspective. I think the way around that for employers is to just have regular checkups. I think it comes back to that culture side where you really know your team, you really know what gets them ticking, like Ian said. You really understand what gets them up out of bed every morning to come to work and to drive them and for them to be a better person and estate agent. So understanding those values is a way in which you can hold regular conversations with them, regular one-to-ones, get to know them and what they're feeling at the moment, what they feel the market's like, what they're struggling with, what their boundaries are, and just working with them. And if they say, unfortunately my partner's lost a job and we're stressing at the moment because we're short on money, I've just have those conversations. It's good to know people's personal lives, not just through the work environment. Yeah. And then you can combat those challenges.
communication and progress. I think if you can teach people new skills, they'll stay with you for excuse me, for a long time. I've always found that if someone's learning from the experience around them, or you're spending time out of your day to give them new skills, then typically people stay much happier and they become better. And I found that actually because with Avocado, we've been working with 2 apprentices in our marketing team. It's slightly different. Obviously, they're doing agency marketing, but both young people, a guy and a girl, very different personalities. And on a Wednesday, they are at home. They do their apprenticeship kind of tuition stuff. But these people are not, they're not earning money effectively. They are earning money, but it's bobbins. They're both on 12 grand a year for these apprenticeships, and they've got this 16-month program. But the reason why they absolutely love every day, and you can see it on their face, is because constant tuition is there, constant education, understanding new things. Why does that happen? This is a new skill in this area. And they'll get through their 16 months and then they'll go on to proper packages and be, full-time employees of the marketing team, hopefully is the goal. But, the reason why they're so happy is because they're learning. And it's because you're putting time out of your day to sit down and go, right, this is, I don't know, it could be anything. The most recent thing was yesterday. I sat down to go through camera angles and sort of show different camera angles on podcast. And sometimes we were taking a frame that was too low and we were getting too many crotch shots and it was a bit awkward, and kind of just these little things to show, right, this is why, this is the difference, this is what we want. And now you probably won't see any crotch shots on our podcast with any luck.
Oh, I'm not going to stop watching.
Yeah, we've got 2 weeks worth of recordings, so come back in October if you don't want them. Stay in September if you do. But those little things, I think, make a big difference. And I've seen in agency quite a lot where people, they don't do the one-to-ones. They don't spend that little bit of extra time having a chat. And, back in the day, it could be anything. You were doing a coffee run and you knew someone was a bit quiet and not themselves, so you used to bring them with you, and just have a little chat while you were doing the coffees. Or if you were dropping leaflets, you used to take the person out with you. Why was the director doing a leaflet drop? I was doing a leaflet drop because I was doing a one-to-one with the person that I was doing the leaflet drop with, not because I wanted to drop leaflets. Those little things are really important for staff retention and really important for staff progress, I think, is that you, much like you just said there, Myles, is that you open them up and find out what's going on. I would imagine a lot of people that you speak to that are in the more 10-year career bracket, that have been somewhere for 10 years, it must be really something to tick them off at that point. But is there a particular theme that you find in the more senior roles, when you're seeing a value or a branch manager sort of bounce around or want to bounce around? Is there a real thing that happens at that senior level that becomes frustrating that you find when you're talking to people?
Yeah, I think in terms of the culture side and getting to know what makes people tick and what, like you said, the success you've had out of those 2 apprentices, they're enjoying it because they're learning something. I think that's a lot more important when it comes to less senior members of the business. Just because that's their sponge phase. This is their phase where they're new into the industry. This is their most important time to learn. And for you to then be able to retain them, you need to understand them as a person and keep them interested in what you're doing. I think for more senior people, it is a bit more of a numbers game. They've got the skill set. They know how to do a state agency. Obviously, you need to get your point across around molding them to your business. And I think that's the one key thing that I would say that a lot of businesses struggle. Someone coming from one estate agency into another estate agency, but 10 years at this estate agency, joining a new estate agent. It's trying to mold them into your way of doing things, because not all estate agents like that. It's a fascinating point for you, actually, because I'm curious as to how you do that, because that's probably something that do you interview for that a lot, in terms of how, if one person's used to doing it X way and you want them to do it this way, In terms of the actual process, I'm talking about the actual physical refined process of you being an estate agent, being a valuer, being a branch manager. Um, I think that's the one thing that estate agents need to get right in trying to transition them from their way of doing things into your way of doing things. And I think that's a fascinating point to flip back on you, Ian, if that's something you don't mind
Yeah,
expanding on.
well, when I was director, working in a 10 branch business, is a different thing that I used to look at was estate agency is not just I'm recruiting for a estate agency. A negotiator role, a valuer role, and a manager role are the three roles that happen if you're going to have a long career, and they're all massively different. So normally, the best negotiator, the best office negotiator that's organised that you really rely on is not often a very good valuer. They're not. They normally are going to be a really good manager, but that organised, methodical negotiator that gets the paperwork right, the compliance good, the CRM's on point. It's not often that they're going to then be a really strong valuer. They might get a lot of valuations through touting consistency and follow up, but they'll actually lose a lot in the living room because that's not where they are. But you have to get them through that middle transaction, that middle bit, because they're going to be a shit hot manager. And that's the thing that not always people are aware of, is they're trying to shoehorn someone. Whereas you can see someone who's a negotiator who can put a deal together. They normally got their leg crossed on the chair. They're quite casual. The CRM notes are awful, but they're just on a Thursday when you need a deal. That guy's putting a deal together. That girl's putting a deal together. And you're kind of going, I need to give you the education of being a negotiator, but I need to fast track you into being a valuer. And then you're never going to manage jack shit unless you've got a really good AM next to you that's organised, because it won't work. So a lot of it is kind of reading what the role is and what the person is. And that was, for me, is the visualization of seeing what happens next. That was why I used to be called the Tinkerman, because at the end of the year, I'm moving people around offices because I knew that person's ready to value, but not in the office that they're negotiating, which is 100 miles an hour. So I'd move them to a quiet village office to learn how to be a valuer, to do a little bit of a hybrid role, get some skills. And then when they've mastered those skills, bring them back to the busy office as the full-time valuer and say, right, crack on, rather than just, putting them in the sinking ship. It's just not going to work. So, but that's the ability from a high level to be able to look at what you're trying to do over the next 3 years, because it was always a 3-year project. And not everyone's able to do that. It's easier when you're a director at, in a big 10 branch company, because you can play small office, big office quite comfortably. If you're in a 3 branch company, it's probably a little bit difficult to do that, especially if you're still doing agency. I wasn't doing agency. My job was to make officers work. So, you kind of learn that, but it's knowing what that person's best role is going to be. And what you just said there about the senior guys, I do find that the management thing is a really key thing, because I think that's why a lot of people leave our industry that are really good, because they've spent 6, 7, 8 years being sales, conversions, cross-selling, commission. Management is a different party altogether, and you have to start working with someone in education, tuition, even if they don't realise it, a solid 12, 18 months prior to giving them the opportunity of taking a branch. And if owners and directors and senior people don't do that, you're making it really difficult for yourself. It's responsibility has to come before the title comes, in my eyes. And I think that's where people get it wrong. If you've got a member of staff that's kind of like almost of the view, well, I'll do that when I've got the role and the pay rise, they're not right for that role. You want to see a branch manager managing an office 12 months before they get given the title, because they're right for it. So I used to see it in my ladder, like when I was a member of staff trying to climb the ladder. Whatever the next step on the ladder was, that's what I would deliver, so that when the door was available, no one else was walking through it, only me, because I'd done it for 12 months before, 6 months before. That's probably a good tip for people that are out there as well. If what's the next step, deliver that. so that it's a no-brainer when the opportunity arises, really. But not everyone will be thinking that way, but that's what I learned. That would be my advice to people listening.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think a good analogy is thinking of it as like a football captain. You don't have a vote and a selection process as to who's going to be your captain, really. You just stand out. You're just the loudest on the team and the most passionate and heart on your sleeve type guy that naturally gets picked for that role, Just showing you can do it.
We were as we sort of come to the end and we talk football a little bit, we were talking about which Premier League manager would make the best estate agency branch manager. What do you reckon, Myles? You're big in your football, big Leeds fan, play obviously a lot of good standard football yourself.
Estate agent manager.
Yeah.
Are we branch manager or director?
Branch manager, running the office. It's not Ten Hag. I think we can all say it's not going to be him.
I would have said Klopp before his reign ended, but I would probably go Pep.
I mean, Pep's an easy choice because of the talent.
Yeah, you can't have Pep.
I didn't want to be so cliche.
It'd have to be Ellsler. It'd be a very up and down branch with the Ellsler, but it might be quite entertaining, I reckon.
Hang on, I need to get a list of bloody managers. I can't think of it.
Because you got your Eddie Howe's of the world, which obviously
you need to remember, I'm not in the Premier League anymore, so I don't care as much.
To be fair, it's actually quite a tough question these days because the Premier League managers, the roundabout that happened in the summer was quite difficult. I think if you go back to your old school ones, you kind of got, your big Sam versus a Jose, versus a Wenger. They're the kind of the different personalities that I would say you put out there.
I think I'd go Ange Postecoglou. Seems a really nice, likable guy.
And he'd get the team going. I think very passionate.
Yeah.
An accent's always effective in sales, isn't it? Like that.
Yeah. Okay, good answer. Maybe this becomes a theme, Mark. Anyone that's into their football, we have to ask that question. Let us know in the comments who yours is. Myles, very insightful. Really appreciate you coming on. And
Cheers for having me.
Yeah, it's great to see it because I'm a little bit out of the recruitment world for estate agents for the last 5 years. So it's great to hear that things are moving on, but there's still a long way to go. But and also get your insight into the things around culture and that advice and communication and being transparent. That's the big takeaways for people, I think, is set your culture right, fill the right holes with the right pegs, and make sure the transparency is there from the outset, which is stuff that you could easily relate to valuations like you have done. So yeah, thank you very much for that, and we'll see you soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, cheers guys.
A massive thank you once again to Myles White from Crux for joining us today. We talked about it on the intro being a massive part of agency. It's a massive part where agents struggle, but Myles really delivered some good little pointers there that agents can take. And it sounds not like rocket science, but I think a lot of agents get it wrong.
Yeah, it relates so much to the client, doesn't it? The analogies he's using about valuations and things like that, just it's so relatable. But yeah, set that culture. What do you want that business culture to be? What is your mission statement? That these are things that are really important, especially to the generation we're in now and we're moving more into, is what is the purpose? Why is the business in existence? And they want to know figures and numbers and growth and targets, and as a group, not just on themselves, so that they know what they're working towards. It's kind of like the nest for ants or bees or wasps or whatever. Like, it's like, right, we need to be working as one, and I think that's really important, that communication, that culture is set from the outset for businesses to be A-grade businesses for A-grade candidates, as he put it. That was quite interesting, actually, to hear a recruiter talk about an A-grade candidate.
Yeah. And I think that maybe there's a sort of old school view of an agency that we don't need to be as transparent at interview process. But I think we're in a world now where we do need to be completely transparent, not just about the business and where we're going and our goals and what have you, but also about the figures and the numbers as you talk about, because gone are the days where we're interviewing somebody just one way. It's definitely two way. And that's what Myles talked about, didn't he? When he talked about, world-class agency being about culture and reputation, he also talked about, is the business right for the candidate? We've got to sell ourselves to the candidate in a way that we sell ourselves to a client at evaluation. I think that's a very good analogy of comparing the two. And for me, the biggest thing that I can take from that, and probably the biggest mistake that we've made over the years, is the preparation. You've got to be really prepared when you're going into this recruitment process, because it's very easy to get it wrong by, he said, changing the spec or, changing the goalposts a little bit. You've got to make sure that not only are you communicating your culture and your business goals, but you're also communicating what you expect them to do, and that expectation shouldn't change. And that's definitely where we've gone wrong over the years as a small team.
Yeah, I think personal development is so important, especially when you get to senior levels, for owners and directors and managers to spend a little bit of time just learning more about business and learning more about people and your own personal development outside of industry training stuff. I just think is really important. I think you get the more business owners I talk to, the more knowledgeable I am about running a business, and that means all different tiers and levels. I spent a whole day yesterday with someone that works for a huge company, and just understanding little things that they do was very interesting for me, for a big corporate giant that's turning over millions and millions, but everyone in that business knows what the big target is for the year, and if they get to a period where they're behind target, the whole company almost presses an alarm button called fill the gap. And the whole company knows that they're in a fill the gap moment. And that means that everyone's hands to the pump to get the gap filled to that target. And they're all doing it for each other, because they know if the gap is not filled, people will lose their jobs. So it's right, shoulder to shoulder, let's go at this together. And I just thought, it's scary, but at the same time, that's culture. It's like everyone doing it together because they're transparent with the fact that we have shareholders. This is the target we must hit. Everyone's responsible for doing it. So you haven't got someone sort of sat on the sides, not fussed. Everyone's doing it together, and it's like a real team bonding exercise that brings the best out of everyone. But in agency, I would struggle to say that something like that that you do something like that, because most targets are kept as a secret. So yeah, culture, transparency, thinking about those things that Myles said that has an impact on whether someone, will join you or even inquire about a role that you've got available. And then for me is, as I sort of said in the pod, it's also thinking about that 3-year project for each person, spending a little bit of time. What does their career look like over the next 36 months? And sometimes some people really, really enjoy knowing that. Some people don't need to hear that. But you know what it is, and it's your job to manage and lead efficiently and coach efficiently to deliver that. Some of the best guys that I'd worked with that were, my generals in that army, if you like, that had been with me for sort of 10, 12, 15 years, because I was always telling them what the next step was for them and how they needed to get there, and then coached them to get there. There were super loyal people that would have done everything, but they had a purpose, they had a mission of what they were trying to achieve, and that was really important. So that's for me is agency, is being a bit more foresight with what your plan is and your project is for them and for the company, really.
Yeah, and that goes back, that's obviously starts right at the interview with the transparency. The biggest thing that I took from it personally, my business, we had a really good candidate approach us yesterday. We're not recruiting at the moment, but when Myles talked about those people that want a career in agency, this person wants a career in agency, and I'm thinking that's a great opportunity, because they don't come around very often. But the biggest thing that I took from it is about finding time for my team, and I think I've probably dropped the ball a little bit on that recently. So that's the big thing that I'm going to take and implement personally within Moving Works over the next few weeks and months, because I feel like we've got a really good team, but we need to make sure that we keep that team and grow it. And as you talked about there, finding a 3-year project for each person, I think will be a really effective way of doing that.
Yeah, it definitely helps. So yeah, hopefully people really enjoyed the podcast. And if anyone wants to obviously chat with Myles or us directly, then they can drop us a DM on the comments. Obviously give Myles a shout. He's a good guy. He's very passionate about it. And like I said, estate agents in his blood. So I really enjoyed the episode of actually asking the questions myself, because I'm a little bit out of touch with agency recruitment, obviously with avocado. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, massive thank you once again to Myles for joining us. As you know, we do this because we love our industry. We want to see it improve and get better. If you have enjoyed today's show, please share it out on social media, share it with colleagues, drop us a message. I'm Mark Worrall. He's Ian MacBeth. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you again next week.